You're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged, but again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can
and
say
what does intersex mean?
is that there's a difference between sex and gender, and I think
is there
in
a
these
difference between women and men?
What I can say here is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
The rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is that a yes? So I'm trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech. Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're not answering that. Let me ask you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is different than gender.
Why
and I do believe that women's sports have a great value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right now.
Ms. Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But why have a separate category for women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record an article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100-meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18. In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100-meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men. If the radical Democrat agenda to destroy girls' sports and women's sports succeeds, little girls will not have a chance to compete. So I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record.
Of counterfeiters using high-strength magnets in some of the knockoffs of your product. And I think that these were not goods that were not made in the United States of America. Is that right?
That's right. These samples I have here, which I ordered last week, were not made in the United States. Some of them do have producer markings. This one says made in China. This one says nothing at all. And they do contain these high-strength magnets, which cause significant hazard to children when they're playing with this product.
Absolutely, and I just want to underline that we're talking a lot right now about supply chain and manufacturing issues, which is absolutely important given our supply chain crisis. But I think what we're also seeing in this context is that when giant companies like Amazon help hawk foreign counterfeits, these are counterfeits, they're made abroad, parents don't usually have any way of knowing this, it's very difficult to find out. They're not only endangering children, they're also taking jobs away from people like you and your company that are made here in this country. Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Mr. Dugan, I just want to start with you, if I could. I noticed something in your testimony that I thought was interesting. You said that much of the problem with counterfeit goods online is due to organized crime in brick stores and brick and mortar stores, and that organized criminals shoplift from those stores and then they turn around and they sell the goods online. Have I got that right?
No, Senator, I don't think I commented on counterfeit goods.
Well,
probably stolen goods.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Stolen goods. Stolen. I'm sorry, I introduced the word counterfeit. I mean, they're goods online that are stolen, and then they steal them from brick and mortar stores and turn around and sell them online. Have I got that?
Yes, sir.
That right? Okay. So the New York Times earlier this year had a story in which you were quoted, I think, as saying our security officers are assaulted on a pretty regular basis in San Francisco, and that San Francisco is one of the epicenters of organized retail crime. Have I got that right?
Yes, sir. You do.
Can you just say more about that? Because I think this is something that has not been widely reported, is not widely understood. That part of the problem that we're seeing in counterfeit, or in this case, stolen goods online. I mean, we've got a deluge of these goods, and it's linked also, it now turns out, to the crime wave that we're also seeing across the country. So maybe say something more about that.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that question, Senator. I will start by saying that this is not a big city crime, that this occurs in all 50 states. Thefts of organized retail crime occur just as much in low-crime suburban neighborhoods as they do in America's largest cities. I know that's probably news to a lot of folks because it's not covered on the media as it is in some of our major cities. So what I meant to say is we were talking about San Francisco specifically. There's a lot of stolen product there that gets filtered to other states, specifically like Texas, North Carolina, and New Jersey. They get a lot of that stolen product from San Francisco. So what I was trying to make a point was, even though the product is stolen in one area, the problem is statewide. That's why we need federal legislation.
Right. So in other words, it can be stolen from one place, San Francisco, New York, St. Louis, whatever, wherever. And but then it finds its way online. I mean, so it shows up in online marketplaces in some contexts, and it's competing with legitimate goods with goods that are entirely legal online. And you've got competition that's making its way into these online marketplaces that's due to organized crime at the brick and mortar level. Is that fair to say? Have I got that right?
That is fair to say, except I would add it's unfair competition.
Right, yeah, exactly.
They're getting the products for much cheaper. But that's what our team does. We track these investigations state to state. All across the country, and then ultimately it leads us to the same place, which is an online marketplace, which is why we're looking for your help today.
And what do you think is the best way for this body to address that phenomenon?
I think the swift passage of the Inform Act is a vital first step.
Very good. Thank you for that. I want to turn to the Amazon self-preferencing question here for a moment. Mr. Mutrick, I think that you testified to Senator Klobuchar earlier that your product in particular, that Amazon for a while had an Amazon Basics knockoff of your product. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
It's now been taken down. Is that?
It was taken down only because it, I'll say, accidentally infringed on some of our registered trademarks.
I see. So I just want to highlight this problem because I think it's so central. Last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that Amazon collects detailed data about merchandise so Amazon can create copycat products. They did that with your product, it sounds like. The Wall Street Journal report said this was standard operating procedure. Amazon denied that. They said they had procedures in place banning the practice. Now, has that been your experience, Mr. Mutrick?
I do not have any insight into how Amazon makes their decisions, but I was aware that the 4-pack that they created, or 6-pack that they created, bore a striking resemblance to another unique item that we had on Amazon.
Well, it doesn't seem that you're the only one. Employees in the same report said that the procedures that Amazon referenced weren't enforced. And in fact, Amazon encouraged employees to break those procedures. And then last month, Reuters reported that Amazon's own internal documents reveal it's still doing the same thing. The markup has reported evidence that Amazon is systematically rigging its search engine to return results for its copycat products over producers like you, Mr. Mutrick. And I just want to drive home the point that we can talk all day about the problems of counterfeit goods, and those are significant, but that's not going to make a huge dent, I don't think, unless we do something about the self-preferencing on these platforms. I've introduced legislation that would prohibit this self-preferencing. I've joined legislation by Senator Klobuchar and Senator Grassley that heads in the same direction, and I just want to underline that I think that is absolutely vital that we tackle this issue. Last thing, Mr. Mutrick, in my few remaining seconds here, Senator Blackburn was asking about some of the country of origin issues. And
Ms. Robinson, I want to follow up by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions. And this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are two sexes, but there can be more than two genders?
I wouldn't even say two, and we've got Dr. Lopez here as well, but there's also the definition of intersex. I think that often in these conversations we're conflating sex and gender, and I do want to affirm here that trans women are women. That is their gender.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. Do you make a distinction between sex and gender?
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain that. Do you think there are more than two sexes?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned at birth.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged, but again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can say
what does intersex mean?
Is that there's a difference between sex and gender, and I think in these conversations we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex. Okay, there's male, there's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third sex.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay. And how many genders are there?
I think the gender is expansive, and the definitions are always growing. Today I can tell you, I talk to young people that talk about non-binary as
more than 5.
I think the gender is not a binary, is what I'm trying to say.
Are there more than 5 genders? I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
Well, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our gender that are expansive.
Are there more than 5?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders there are, but what I can say is that gender is a reflection. Number? Excuse me?
There's an infinite number of genders?
I think depending on your culture, there are a lot of different genders that exist. And I can also say that it's a term that's evolving. If you look at young people today, they really don't lean into the binary of only woman and man. So I think that it's incumbent upon us not to legislate on this, but create space for them to explore what their identities are, what their gender identities are.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are 3 sexes, male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And there are an infinite number of genders, because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl, okay? Biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
What's your real-world experience?
It depends. There are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are shorter.
You don't believe that a biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female. I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves. And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights. And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sport. Acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Kennedy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
News article stated that both CVS and Walgreens say shoplifting in San Francisco outpaces thefts at their stores across the country. Pretty common sense. If you remove or greatly reduce the penalty for stealing things, theft gets worse. What exactly are the figures for non-employee theft in CVS stores around the country? And in particular, how do the rates of theft differ in jurisdictions with so-called progressive prosecutors who decline to prosecute shoplifting versus jurisdictions where law enforcement is enforcing laws against theft?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to disclose CVS financial information about losses. But if you allow me to comment, this is not a big city problem, right? Decriminalization is contributing to the problem. You're right, sir.
Is there more theft in San Francisco than elsewhere?
No, sir.
There's not.
Not relative to the amount of stores and market share that we have. It's higher. But
so NBC News was wrong when they said that.
I can only speak to what I see every day on the ground, Senator, and I follow these criminals day to day from state to state and city to city.
So CVS would support other jurisdictions legalizing shoplifting up to $950?
CVS does not support legalizing shoplifting.
Why not?
Senator.
Why not?
We're not going to endorse criminal activity.
But you're saying it has no effect.
I never said it had no effect.
You said there's not worse shoplifting in San Francisco. I find that highly dubious.
No effect, Senator.
Does it have an effect or not?
Yes, of course it does.
What's the effect?
The effect is shoplifting is completely different than organized retail crime. If you're talking about shoplifting, that's a whole different dynamic than organized retail crime.
And so my question is, what's the effect? You guys have the data.
I'm sure I understand your question, Senator. Is there an effect? Do we take losses to shoplifting? Yes, like every other retailer.
And are they greater in jurisdictions that effectively legalize it?
No, they're not.
So then why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting? Your questions are not, your answers not making any sense, sir.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think it's making perfect sense. What I'm saying, Senator, is this crime goes to all 50 states. It's not a big city problem. Absolutely not.
So why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting? Sir, why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting?
We're not going to. Why are we not going to oppose?
Why?
Legalizing shoplifting?
Yes.
No, we're not going to do that, Senator. We're not going to endorse criminal activity. But shoplifting is a different dynamic than organized retail crime. And what I'm here to testify about today is that organized retail crime affects every city,
that's really quite remarkable.
including the major cities in Texas.
That's really quite remarkable. Let me ask a different question, which is you go into great detail about organized criminal organizations, but I want to point to you to something in Ms. Campbell's testimony, where she cites the work of J.P. Kennedy, who's written a lot on the subject of theft. And one scholarly article that Mr. Kennedy wrote, Functional Redundancy in Response to Employee Theft Within Small Businesses, has an interesting paragraph on the second page which is relevant to this discussion. It says, quote, "It has been estimated that employee theft within the United States is 10 times more costly than all forms of traditional street crime, and that it cost victimized businesses in the U.S. economy as much as $400 billion a year. Furthermore, employee theft is estimated to cost victimized businesses significantly more than non-employee theft within the same businesses." In your experience, what is the relative magnitude of employee theft versus non-employee theft for retailers?
My scope at CBS, Senator, is to investigate the external part of the theft. I don't have the internal figures necessarily at CBS. I will say overall, as a president of the Coalition of Law Enforcement and Retail, that internal theft is down. I could certainly provide you a report with those figures attached to it, Senator, if you'd like me to. But
do you have any judgment as to which is bigger, employee theft or non-employee theft?
Well, I might be a biased opinion there, Senator, because I'm in the street every day working on organized retail crime. I see the harm that it does every day, why we need this federal legislation. So I see it.
Sir, with all respect, I'd like you to answer my question. Do you have any judgment as to which is bigger, employee theft or non-employee theft? And in particular, Mr. Kennedy says employee theft is 10 times larger.
No, I would disagree with that assessment.
Do you have any judgment as to which is bigger, employee theft or non-employee theft?
Most recently, over the spread of this epidemic, I would say non-employee theft.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr.